I started to pivot towards health and wellness when I started to, again, do more of the journaling and realize that the greater purpose beyond just playing video games and having fun was actually to turn back to the system that had initially led to brokenness in my life and in my family's life, and start to do the work toward fixing it. Like that was like the real life video game. Like that was like the real life. That was like the real boss battle.
Welcome to another episode of the Creators for Change podcast. Today we are joined by Evan Galeano, a storyteller, filmmaker, and the founder of a brand Story. Evan, we're so happy to have you here today.
What's up? Happy to be here.
So Evan recently held an event in LA called Healing Stories, and I went to that event, and Evan, I will say, I felt really strongly connected with your work ever since. And it really carried a weight with me that I've carried forward. And in particular, it struck me how much storytelling can connect us and bring us together, not just in business, but just in healing overall. So I'm really excited to explore that with you today. But just to start, could you share with us your personal story and how Brand Story came to be?
Wow. Yeah. Thank you, Ari, for the personal story. Yeah. I mean, this usually that's how I like to keep it open-ended and ask. And it's so funny because being on the other side of it now, being asked that story, being asked like, what's your personal story, man? It's such an open-ended question. And it's like, where do you begin? So, but it's good. I like to leave it open-ended because it does also allow for me to like choose where to begin. And I guess where I would begin is at the very beginning, like childhood. Right, and that's oftentimes where whether we know it or not, whether we realize it or not, like where the groundwork starts to be built for later on in life, like what career we ended up picking, what passions we have, what purpose. And for me, growing up, I grew up in Burbank, California. I grew up with a family who, from a young age, we were dealing with a mental health crisis in the family, with my little brother being diagnosed when he was 2 years old with severe autism. And from then on, we never really, moving on, we did our very best. My parents did their best to give us a quote unquote normal life, but life was oftentimes anything but normal. Ever since then, I had a lot of, I'd say myself, mental health challenges that growing up, I was always sort of the one who was healthy, like, comparatively to what my brother was going on through. But I'd say our entire family struggled, with just from financially to just attempting to like feel good despite just how much difficulty my brother was going through, and just how much that completely changed the trajectory of our lives. My parents flew to all different kinds of doctors, ended up going to holistic doctors when the healthcare system here in America wasn't really quite helping them. They went abroad, they traveled down to Mexico, they traveled to doctors who were at the cutting edge of different therapies and modalities, hyperbaric oxygen chambers. They were trying to do detox for him. Once they found out that heavy metals pretty much they found traces of heavy metals like aluminum, lead, mercury through his blood, and then they after looking at scans of his brain, said that it doesn't look like he was born like this. It doesn't look like it was a genetic thing. It doesn't look like it was actually even autism, although he had autistic symptoms, but it was brain damage. And a lot of his severe behaviors and autistic-like symptoms were from a brain damage that occurred in his brain when he was very young. And that tracks, because my parents do remember from a young age him growing up to a point where he was up before 2 years old. He was developing normally. He was developing speech. He was present. He was looking healthy. He was even singing songs, and then his behaviors completely took a nosedive. And I we just we went through life doing our very best to still be happy and have a quote unquote normal life. But from a young age, like I was exhibiting behaviors in my classes that oftentimes I was being punished for sort of being an attention seeker, for constantly being attempting to get attention and get laughs and get just really it was I was at a young age, like I was an attention seeker. And looking back, it was probably from just the sense of having a home life that was not sort of normal, and my parents having to take a lot of time to spend with my brother, to really just a lot of times to keep him from biting his hands, keep him from smashing his head into the wall, because that's how bad the behaviors got.
Yeah.
And so I grew up with a sense of, I guess, isolation, with a sense of a bit of loneliness. Oftentimes in my room playing computer games, and that went on to, yeah, I'd say affect my entire trajectory growing up. But you're gonna ask something?
Yeah, it sounds like you had a lot of things piling up on top of, your home life, not to mention the financials, your brother, and things you went through at school. So it seems like there was a lot of weight to carry. And remember, everyone, that a creator for change is someone who takes control of their circumstances, because sometimes we can't control our circumstances. You didn't choose to. You were a child. You didn't choose to have those certain situations with your family. And just remember, everyone, that even if things aren't easy and you hit rock bottom, a creator for change is someone who takes control. They turn adversity into fuel for a bigger mission. So do you mind sharing with us when you hit rock bottom and how you were able to rise from the ashes to create Brand Story?
Yeah, I mean, there was a few rock bottoms. I'd say the first was in high school, when there was a lot of repression and a lot of ignoring my own growing up. Mental health wasn't really talked about back then. It was sort of stigmatized, at least for those of us who were, again, deemed quote unquote like normal. Those of us who were seen to not have mental issues in any way. But ultimately, everyone, I'd say, goes through their own challenges and their own internal mental challenges in life, and different. And so I guess what I'd say is that around senior year of high school was when everything kind of came crashing down. I was taking an antibiotic, and the American healthcare system just showing up and just sort of doing the exact opposite, apparently, of what it is supposed to be designed to do. They prescribed me a very, very large amount of antibiotics for a very extended period of time for acne. And they did it. It was non-FDA approved, but they did it anyways. And because the previous round of antibiotics that they had me on was not working, and my acne returned. And within a few months, it was like right in the beginning of my senior year, my mental health started to very rapidly decline, and it all seemed to happen at once. And because I was not in my right mind. I started to dissociate and experience like almost like schizophrenia like symptoms. I was experiencing like ruminating thoughts, depression, anxiety, and I had never experienced that before. So when you're someone who's experiencing that for the first time and you've never experienced it before, it's really hard to put into words what is going on. And honestly, the gaslighting is pretty insane, because like everyone around you just kind of was like, well, okay, just, hey, you're having a phase, you're having something, you're having a bad day, and that's sort of how mental health is sort of treated, again, with quote unquote normal people. It's like, oh, you're just having a bad day or a bad week or a bad month. Just strap up your bootstraps and get on with it, or even to the more drastic, approaches when it's still not getting better. Others around you will then resort to tough love. At least that's what I experienced was, okay, well then just stopping a wuss. Like, okay, all right, now you're really starting to, because then it becomes a burden on these other people around you. And, I no, but no one knew how to help me. I didn't know how to help myself, and no one knew how to help me. So I held resentment for some time, and I've since I've let a lot of that go. Just people didn't, including the system itself. Like, it was all sort of set up. There was a programming that we were just sort of like. I do feel like the entire American public has been gaslit as to what healing is and what health is, what true wellness is. And so I basically reached a point where I was like considering suicide because I felt like my brain was broken. I had been going now 6 months. I had pretty much lost all connections with all friends. And then it continued into college, even though I eventually found out that it was the antibiotics that were doing it. When I looked at the pill bottle and I read that, I had to peel back a page to find the rare side effects that were hidden from view, and find the finest of print saying rare side effects, depression, anxiety, mental visual changes, anxiety. And I go on to, that's when I go on Google and I type in the name and I type in the symptoms, and I just find forums of all of these people who are talking about how this new non-FDA drug had it was called Solidin. I think it might even still be on the market. And a lot of people have asked me why I haven't sued. Yeah, it's just, it's heavy. It's like once you get out of that, once you finally get into healing, it's like you just kind of want to just move on with your life. But
yeah,
maybe I still feel maybe I should sue. I don't know.
I understand that resentment, but what I love about you, Evan, is that you didn't just stay knocked down. It's still frustrating, but you actually did something with it. And something that we're big advocates for is mental health. But I'm not a therapist, but both Evan and I can both say that one of the best cures to our mental health was sharing our story and creating a brand that actually helped other people to amplify their voices. So with that being said, Evan, could you talk about how you went from that to starting Brand Story? How did that idea even come to start an agency and a business?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because I didn't even think I was going to go to college, and then I went to college. I was pretty much alone through the whole time. I wanted to. I think I was attracted to filmmaking because I felt that it could give me a voice when I myself was uncomfortable. I was really socializing became very hard for me, and I had a severe social anxiety and agoraphobia, and the camera was able to give me a way of communicating what I was going through, and through storytelling I could communicate the emotions better than I could explain it to people. And so that's what I began doing, was telling stories that really resonated with me. And when I graduated from film school, I entered the film world, the industry, and pretty much immediately I found myself in a sort of another environment that just the environment just felt unhealthy. It was very toxic, and it was long work hours, working 16 hours a week, and I was burning out fast. And I sensed that burnout, it was not going to be an environment that I would last very well in. And then, I'd say that it all pivoted when I went to my first event, similar to Healing Stories. I went to an event that was also about story, but it was called Story Influence, and it was by one of my very first mentors in the entrepreneur world. His name is Chris Smith, and it was a 2-day event. It was free, and it blew my mind. It sort of cracked me wide open. He went into, how the power of understanding your story, taking a stand for what you believe in, seeing that you are the creator of your story, that no one writes your story for you, but that you write your own story, that you are the creator, and that you hold the pen and decide through the decisions and the actions that you make, you decide your story. And that was a very, I'd say, eye-opening moment, because up until that event, the story I was always fed was, you've got to rely on the system. And that's why I was so, I'd say up to that point, the system is what broke me, because the system's broken. So if I'm relying on a broken system, then it's breaking now. Then I'm broken along with the system. So it's like I was on a sinking ship, and I had to learn how to actually like see that so clearly. Like it's such a simple concept, but up until that day, I just had never been actually told and given the permission by anyone or anything. Like I just never heard that from someone in such a clear way of just like, look, you hold the pen to your story, you
Yeah.
know?
You, we have similar paths. I won't go into mine, but I remember having that epiphany too from an event. And I remember that epiphany like, you are the creator. That's
Hmm.
actually where I came up with Ari, the creator. You are the
I love it.
creator, Ari.
Yeah.
Then I came up with creator for change because then you could take that a step further and create something that helps others. But I think a big first step in that is just telling your story because there's healing in that. After your event, you and I got to talking, and we were talking about like even like our parents. If our parents don't tell us their story, how can we heal from it? Because their stories and their experiences affected them. So how could we even heal? So my question for you is like what was the moment that you realized that storytelling wasn't just about creativity or marketing, but like actually like healing you?
Yeah, that probably came when my parents had almost lost the house twice for foreclosure, and then both times like narrowly avoided it. But finances were always an issue, as they always did everything they could, and I mean, I'm so glad they did. They gave my brother he because of all what they did, taking liens off the house and putting so much money toward the best treatment that they could possibly for so long, for years and years, until eventually the finances just it got too much. And unfortunately, that ended up with just a lot of debt for our family. And one day I got a call. I was on a shoot for a music video, and I got a call that something really like nearly fatal happened. My brother fell through the front window of the house, and so it was very shocking for my parents. Um, and his behaviors were just extra aggressive that day, and he like pushed through the window, and it came down on him and cut him open on his side. And I remember getting the call from my dad and him saying, I think we're gonna have to sell the house again. And in that moment, that was the moment where I don't remember whether or not I had gone to that event yet or not. I don't think I hadn't gone to that event yet, but there was in that moment. The event was when I realized that this is the story that then I can go and share to the because there was a moment where I was on the call with my dad, and I made a decision. I said, that's not going to happen. That is not that potential of losing the house. It felt like in that moment, like with the fear and the uncertainty and the pressure and the weight, like that was pretty much the only option. And I just remember in that moment choosing to believe in possibility, like choosing to believe that like no, there's something that we can create here. And I like it clicked for me, and I knew that you know we had a mini documentary that we had started in college when I was in college that I had made for a documentary class, and I chose to make that mini documentary about my family, my parents, and my brother, and every day, like just their day-to-day life, and what had it went into a bit about what happened with the vaccinations and the heavy metals, and and we decided to put it out. I just said on that call, I said we're going to put the story out, and we're going to explain to people what's going on, and the community is going to the community is going to understand, and there's going to be people who are going to want to help. And it was hard for my parents to wrap their heads around that, because for years and years, they didn't get they had asked for help and didn't quite ever get the help to the extent that the people didn't understand. Like growing up, like we would go to restaurants and people would come up and say, hey, discipline your kid better, he ruined our meal. So there was a lack of understanding, and in that moment, I think that's where it clicked that storytelling, and specifically visual storytelling, with the tools we have available now, it is possible to create understanding. It's possible to create connection and understanding and community in a way that it wasn't possible before. And that was really where everything came together, right? Like our story came together with the work that I had been like the it made sense. All the skills that I had been learning is like, okay, this is where it gets to get put to use. And when we put the mini documentary out, it ended up getting 300 shares, and it raised over a year of living expenses for my family to be able to take care of and to keep the house, which they've been able to keep to this day. So that was the moment, I'd say, where the power of storytelling was very clear. And then at that event, that's where I did the work. I took the leap and invested in myself. And I love the way he framed it. It was like, this was the first time in my life I was investing in something, but I wasn't investing in a degree, or, I wasn't investing in status, or I was investing in myself by investing in this entrepreneurial, it was a $7,500 workshop, 2-day workshop, just to learn how to craft a compelling brand story and message, authentic, that would build sales and belief and brand, and so I did that. I put $7,500 on a credit card, and that was the 2 days that I workshopped. I went to Arizona and I workshopped out that story, and that was like the light bulb moment. I hadn't even thought about telling that story in a way that would help others and inspire others. But when I workshopped it, and then I really found the through line of like, oh, like going and then telling your story, becoming understood by the community, and then having that build belief in, for us at the time, it was having people believe us that, hey, we could use some support here, and then actually giving. But then I saw the application for that when there's a win-win, when there was a win-win, just people getting to see our story. A lot of people reached out and were like, hey, just seeing your story inspired us. And so we want to give this gift, but it's not like, hey, it didn't feel like charity. That was one thing my parents were like, we don't want charity. But it didn't feel like that. It felt like we gave people also an opportunity to become part of our story, and like people really appreciated and felt inspired by seeing our life so authentically, like the stuff that we had to go through, gave them like appreciation for like maybe the lives they had.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that was the big pivot, I'd say.
Congrats. That really is inspiring, because that takes so much bravery and courage to share your story. Sometimes, like, 'cause it brings out vulnerability. So for some people, it's almost like comparable to standing naked in front of a bunch of people, but it's actually not a weakness. It's one of the strongest things that you can do. And I loved when you were telling your story there. I loved how you said that when your father called you saying, we might lose the house, like you chose in that moment. You were like, no, like that's not the end of the story. It's kind of like the point of the story where I'll have you share the hero's framework in just a second here, but it's that point in the story when the hero decides, I'm going to do something about it, and they go on that adventure to embark on that journey to finding a solution. So that's really phenomenal. And another thing that I like about you is, like, I know your brand well, and I know that you help a lot of people in the holistic health space. And so earlier you were sharing your frustrations about the healthcare system, and here you are actually doing something about it, amplifying the voices of people, who have good intentions to help them get their products and their methods out into people's hands. So I love that about you, and it's almost like you're being supported when you started to tell your story. It's like that event came, and I know you mentioned you put it on a credit card, but I've done that too, I'll admit it. I see it as being resourceful and finding a way, and if it wasn't for that, I mean, you wouldn't be doing brand story full time, you wouldn't be doing what you do. Are there any other experiences or opportunities that sharing your story led to?
Well, I'll say this. I'll say that level of vulnerability and sharing my story had both its blessings and its curses. After that amount of exposure and the inevitable sort of like, it became the next few months after that, actually, once I released my first brand story film, where it was me telling my story, I put it out on social media. It was almost like a whirlwind how quickly it built belief, and it led to a ton of referrals. And suddenly I went from this like sort of unknown, relatively unknown in that space, in the marketing and coaching and consulting space, and speakers and stages. I became like from relatively unknown to like within 6 months being referred to work with some of the top players in that space. Because I actually offered, and I went and I worked with Chris Smith. I offered to do a video for him. So that was another, I'd say, like I started to make, I started to look at and like how can I make as strategic and like big lever moves, like what kind of levers can I pull. So I started to see like, okay, well, when I help someone who's already extremely successful, then that those results, they're like their results are way bigger than when I help maybe a small business that's like, I also helped a small business and I helped them turn their business around as one of my first clients. But then when I went to help like Chris Smith, it literally took the testimony I got from him was like, it literally took the film we made. He went from the $7,500 offer to then at the next event playing the video that we made, and then 15K is what the offer was, what he pitched it at, and didn't see reduced conversion. So the power of story was like, and the power of what the work I was doing was like very quickly, rapidly. I was like, it was like an exponential. It felt like I was on this like bell curve, and I was like going way up, 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 up like a rocket ship. But because of my just lack of awareness of the upper limiting problem. I don't know if you've ever heard of a book called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. It goes into
Yeah,
something
I've
that he explains as the upper limiting problem, which is that due to that it's just a human condition and that everyone does it to an extent, but essentially like because of our past traumas or because of um, past trauma pretty much, we tend to subconsciously upper limit ourselves from a certain amount of growth. Like when we reach a point of growth where it feels like it starts to feel like we've never been this high before, this high frequency, successful abundance. Like it's sort of like this roller coaster ride, and it's like we choose subconsciously we start to sabotage ourselves, and we start to feel uncomfortable by that success. And so it's a fear of success, and then it's like actually us choosing to sabotage our success so that so that it doesn't get sort of like, so that life doesn't sort of like wound us. We choose to wound ourselves, or we choose to like stop the, like, okay, like get off the ride, or like go back to earth. Okay, now I feel safe. Go back to baseline. And that came in the form of just like a lot of repressed anxiety and depression coming back around that, that next few months. Just a lot of burnout, picking a lot of big projects, but like overdoing it, knowing deep down like that was going to burn me out, and just completely losing balance too, completely losing sense of balance. Like I was just overworking myself, and I reached a point where in 2020 I was back at the rock bottom. This time worse, insomnia. It was like basically all the stuff that I never really dealt with through in high school, but I just kind of like tried to just move on from. Like the repressed stuff was still there, and I ended up in an inpatient facility for 2 weeks after a really, intense bout of insomnia and suicidal depression. And then pretty much at that point, I was like, I'm never going to do entrepreneurship again. The amount of pressure, the amount of weight, the amount of uncertainty, like it was just, it just mentally, like the way I saw it, I was like, I just can't handle it. I'm gonna have to go find a 9 to 5, and even though I knew deep down like that's not the life for me, and I don't want to do that, and I want to be free, I want to create, I want to have the strength to be able to do this. Like deep down, I was like rock bottom. I was literally like doing collages with people who had been in that system for years, and it was beyond humbling. It was honestly like it was a hellish experience. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I saw a lot of pretty just like beyond sad, like just devastated lives, and a system that was not designed in any way to help them, just numb them and keep them sort of from acting out, which is really just the emotions that they're just bottled up, just all the depression, anxiety, and all of the the pain and the suffering that they'd gone through that no one around them or themselves knew how to get out of. So that's where I'd say the next rock bottom. And I forget the question that you asked, but I was getting to it. Could you remind me of the question that you asked?
Like what experiences or opportunities came from you sharing your story?
Yeah, so basically the question was that what opportunities I got, and the answer is I basically got like just door after door after door opening, and it like as much as I thought that that was gonna be a blessing, it turned into like a real dark night of the soul, of like experiencing the upper limiting problem for like the first time in my life, like to that degree of like understanding what self sabotage. Well, I didn't understand at the time, but like experiencing true self sabotage.
Yeah. So I'm really happy that you're sharing this because in the hero's journey, some people think once they reach success that it's the end of the story, but the hero can run into another problem. So I'm happy that you're sharing that so openly. And so my question is, what exactly triggered it? You mentioned the upper limiting problem and self sabotage, but at the root, what triggered it, and then how did you get out of it?
If you really want to know, there is a deeper story here, and it gets into spirituality, and it does get a bit dark. But um, I was, and it also there's people who don't believe this stuff in this stuff. So it's
You can
like
share,
this
be as open as possible.
cool. So basically, like one of the opportunities that I started to up my rates because like the videos worked for the people, for the stories that worked, and for the people who worked, and like for the brands and businesses that were had a genuine offer and a genuine product and were actually getting results. Then I ended up having one prospect come to me, and I had a vetting process that was pretty rigorous. Like I wanted to make sure anyone I was working with had leads, they had a list, they had a true shot at success, so that when we put the video out, it wasn't just going out to like no audience, that they actually had, like they were going to be able to get conversions with it. And this person told me they had all that, and then we shot the film, and we shot their brand story film. They did the same thing. They put, a big investment on a credit card to pay for it. And then afterwards, when she posted it, there was just like no traction. And then when I remember asking her, I said, "Well, what about your list? Did you send it to your list?" She said, "Like I don't. What are you talking about? Like I don't have a list. I just put it on social media." And I was like, "Okay, like this is like." When we talked, you said you had a list. And so there was some out of integrity stuff happening. And I was still a beginner entrepreneur. So I don't want to put this entirely on her. I myself, maybe I could have been more diligent in my process of vetting her, to maybe get visual proof and confirmation of like list and numbers. But essentially what ended up happening after that was like, I started to get on calls with her to support her and be like, "Hey, like what's going on here? Like let's figure this out." And on the calls, I started noticing that her eyes were starting to looking like really tired, like she hadn't slept in like a week, 2 weeks. She would just like sit on the call and look at me and be like, "Yeah," like, and I started to have this sense that there was something off about the whole situation. And then a few days later, I get a candle in the mail from her, that has a crystal in it. And I didn't think anything of it. I just put it on my bedside, because again, I wasn't, in my mind, I was like, okay, she's still a friend and we're still like, everything's good. But I believe that what ended up happening was in her mind that she started to resent me, that this video wasn't working for her, that this product wasn't working for her. And then I come back in my room, and one of the days, and I see that the candle, it's like as if it had been lit, even though I had never lit it. and that it then it must have popped because the wick was burnt, and then there was a ring around it that was like burn marks, like multiple burn marks in a perfect circle around the candle, like it had spontaneously
Whoa.
ignited and then like popped. And the burn marks were also on my bed, so it was like boom 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 up the wall and then around. And I still, like, to this day, I'm like, did that happened? Like, that's crazy, right? But as soon as that happened, it's almost like that movie, the series of unfortunate events. Like, everything in my life started to completely spiral downward. My computer bricked on like one of the most important days I needed to like finish a project for one of the largest clients that we had taken on, that had the deadline, that needed that project. My computer entirely bricked. I was like that. It was like absurd. It was a brand new Mac desktop. It bricked to the point where it wouldn't even turn on. So I had to go get that repaired. Basically, just every single thing started to go wrong, and then I started to also experience insomnia where I couldn't go to sleep. Um, I would just stay up. My brain, like my mind, was ruminating. But then what started happening was when I closed my eyes, I started to see visuals, like as if I was getting. Now looking back, it's I believe that a hex was placed on me, and I used to not believe in this type of stuff either, until it happened to me. But I would get in the car and randomly it would sync up to my iPhone, and then it would go to like an old song from my iPod that would never play. I didn't even know they were still on my phone, and it would go to like a song by like Korn called like "Watch the Soul Dive," and it would be like this heavy metal lyrics about like suicide. So it was like, and that would just happen out of nowhere. Like it was, so there was that was my first encounter essentially with like spiritual, a spiritual attack, and I
Yeah.
didn't know I didn't know how to handle it. That added to the spiral, was that I was like thinking I was just going crazy again, and that I was having another mental health, schizophrenic, dissociative, like reality was not, I'm just going crazy kind of thing, you know. And
That's
so that
wild. That's so surreal.
yeah,
And I personally like I'm very open, so those of you listening who are like, "Oh, that's not." I'm just trying to be open here, but it sounds like Evan, like it was a combination of that, and you also mentioned before that there were some unprocessed emotions from like high school that were just suppressed. So it seems like just the combination of the two, and then just the downward spiral hit.
yeah, you know. And what I will say, without going into too much detail, is that I ended up finding out later that the occult and that world, um, that I'm not the first one in my family that experienced stuff like that
How'd you discover that?
through family
Through
telling
family.
me.
Okay, so you
There's-
shared the story, I'm sure, and then
Right. I mean, they were aware of what was going on, and essentially, I just there's darkness from the past, and there's generational stuff, and I ended up finding out some stuff that made sense as to why that was happening to me. So I broke that off. But I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Hereditary.
I have not.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. It's
I don't like
terrifying.
scary stuff.
It's
So I probably
it's terrifying. But like, yeah, it's funny because you know it's like those movies are realer than you'd
yeah.
think.
So tying this all back, and I love that you shared that too, because like when you shared your story with your family, then you were able to learn more about your background and your family. So there's so much power in story. It brings healing. It brings connection with others, and a lot of people. And I remember experiencing this too when I wanted to tell my story. A lot of people feel afraid to share their story because they're afraid of backlash or that they're not enough, or even like your client, aside from the fact that she was kind of crazy, uh, that just that feeling of like putting your story out there and like kind of hearing crickets. That's a huge fear for people, especially when it happens. So like, what advice would you have for someone who maybe wants to make a social post or a video sharing their story, but maybe they don't have a list? Like when I remember you didn't have a list when you were just launching your first story about the house. So like, what advice would you have for the people who find it hard to admit their story but also share it?
I would say start showing up and maybe don't make such a massive investment right off the bat. Just the most powerful tool that we have is our phone, and the most powerful message that we have is just like in the present moment. Like, what if you can just, you have your phone, and if you have something that's you can share that can help your fellow human, if you have insight, if you have expertise, if you have special skills that you can teach, then it's literally easier than ever to go and help people. We've got all the tools, so it's just a matter of, it's like, what are we choosing to create? And I would just say start showing up and creating and sharing your story, because that's what I did. I just started going live on Facebook and doing lives, and it was extremely uncomfortable, but that is essentially how I started to open that portal, which is, I mean, social media, cameras, like this is, it's like a portal that you open, and now people can see into your world. You could see, you can't necessarily see into theirs unless you're doing a live like this, but it's extremely powerful portal to open. So you can do it without investing 10K, and that's really for the brands and it's really for the entrepreneurs and brand. Now I have a lot more of a strict vetting process of like who we work with to really ensure that, like, now it's our rates have doubled even, so it's like we're not doing anything under 20K, because when you're investing at that level, it's got to be with, and I still love helping entrepreneurs, but I realized that the best thing I could do is help them just build the belief in their own story and find their message, and then from there, once they've got their why, then showing up and sharing it with this is the most, like, there's people on YouTube right now who are popping off, Ari included, who just post consistently with an iPhone and post daily, and they're building massive followings.
Yeah. We had another guest on, Perry Power. I'll link it right there for those of you interested. He talked about sharing his story about being sexually abused within his family. In that episode, he talks about how he didn't have a following. Just every day he was making like little clips, posting them on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And he was doing that, I think he said, for a very long time. Like maybe not until like his 90th post did one really pop off. And then from there, he built his brand, and his vehicle is helping people capture their story within a book.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I was saying earlier. Like, just post and be consistent, and just don't just do it for like the attention. Do it for you, so that you practice and that you find healing within that. So
Well, I would say do it to help, do it to inspire people. I'd say that the most
yes,
important, the Gary V says the most important thing we can do is share our story. And it definitely took me a while to realize, like, sharing our story is actually not even for us. It's for the collective. Once you share your story, it's now it's the collectives, but it's like there's a freeing of energy that happens when it happens, because you're helping people, you're inspiring specific people, the people who, when they hear your story, they feel theirs. Your story may not resonate with everyone too, but ultimately it does help people. Like, anytime I hear someone's story who reminds me of mine, it's like that's how I got out of the dark night of the soul, actually, of my, both times I would go on YouTube and I would look up like depression, anxiety, like help, and I'd see like the people who would resonate most are the people who would share their story in detail.
yeah, I've actually worked with clients who are like therapists, and they make videos just for that. How to overcome depression, anxiety, and like I said, I don't claim to be a therapist, but just as case studies for me and Evan, like sharing your story, and even if you want to take it a step further and start a brand, is like one of the most healing things that you could do. And we don't just want to tell you that, we also want to give you some practical tools and strategies. So Evan, we do this segment on this podcast. It's called Pack Your Backpack. And so what this does is just help people identify some tools or resources that they can carry with them just to stay grounded, and in your case, unlock their story. So my question for you is, what's in your backpack? It doesn't need to be like an actual physical thing. It could just be like a framework or a meditation that you listen to, some practices.
Yeah, no, I love it. I'd say for me, like the biggest ever, like, daily sort of like things I carry that have helped me the most is incorporating meditation. At least like 5 minutes of meditation a day has been like life changing. Just sitting in a chair and then for 5 minutes, literally doing nothing, you start to become very aware that you're creating your reality. Like you're sitting in a chair and you're either clearing your head and focusing on your breath, or you're having which is a neutral experience, or you're having a negative experience by thinking about, oh man, when is this going to be over? I'm sitting in this chair. Or you're having a positive experience by choosing to be just grateful that you're like sitting and getting to sit in a chair, and that you, hell, this is a nice comfy chair. So like doing that every day, it really does put you in that creator of like remembrance of like, yeah, I am consciously choosing the experience that I'm having just through the perspective that I have on that experience alone. So that's one. A manifestation framework that I carry with me every day, that I remind myself is like, what am I manifesting? It's a 4-letter acronym called SPEC. So S is to specify, be specific about what it is you're manifesting and focus on that specificity, and then projecting it, which is, the part of actually showing up and projecting out your message, projecting out the help that you have to share with others, and the results that you have to share with others so that others are aware. So that's specify, project, and honestly, just these two things like are, because the next two is expect. E is expect it, which is not the same as hoping for it, right? When you expect something, you're planning for it, you're expecting it to happen. So plan A without plan B, which is not the norm. A lot of people oftentimes are saying, well, that might not happen, so what's your plan B? And it's like, if you're planning for plan B, then that's probably what's going to happen, because that's what you're expecting. So expect it. And then C is collect it. And I was more collect it. Yeah. Just receive it, And so you got to be open for that. You got to be open to receive, and you got to be open to the possibilities of maybe it coming in not in the way that you expected.
I love that. So we can meditate, we get in that zone, we realize we're the creator, we go through spec, we know what we're manifesting. Awesome. Now, from that place, because I like to get like kind of like in this creative bubble of energy, and then I like to hit the ground running. So with that being said, what are some frameworks or questions or exercises that people can then take to tell their story and get it out there?
Journal. So one of my tools in my bag, like physically, is a journal. And I'd say, like, if you've never done this before, probably the most powerful thing that I'd say that anyone can do is involving not just their story, but like healing and like self-discovery and like really sitting down and just writing through your life story and just putting pen to paper and sharing the story authentically, as unbiased as you can, which means without judgment on yourself or others, just telling the story as it happened, which can be hard to do the first time, which is why doing this multiple times can be very helpful, because every time you go through, you'll notice more and more that once you've processed the emotions by writing it out, and then this person screwed me over and they were so mean, then you actually can go back and tell the story as it happened, in a way that was unbiased, or a way that's unbiased mostly also toward yourself too, through the lens of compassion and forgiving yourself for what happened. You start to see when you do that, a story that's becoming clear that you've never really been the victim, that you've always been, no matter what's happened, and you've always had that agency of how you choose to respond, of how you choose to overcome, of how you choose to, of how you for some time don't overcome, and how things have affected you. But when you're able to do that from a place without judgment is when things really start to become empowering for yourself and then for others.
I remember at your Healing Stories event, you had us do this. You even had journals, and we were all writing out our story. And you also shared the Hero's Journey framework. I could put an image here on the screen, but do you want to briefly run through that? Because I think it's good that when people tell their story, they don't just ramble, they kind of keep it within a basic framework.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So the hero's journey basically starts sort of like neutral. The hero's just going about their daily life, and then an inciting incident occurs, which is typically like the first wound or the first incident that throws their entire world off. For Luke Skywalker, it was when the Empire came and killed his aunt and uncle, and that essentially sets off a complete change in the trajectory of the story of your story as the hero, and it leads to a falling action where the hero essentially oftentimes is wounded and doesn't want to change, is uncomfortable with the change, and is doesn't quite have the tools yet. They haven't learned. They've never dealt with something like this before. So they're falling essentially. They're attempting maybe to overcome it and failing because again they haven't learned. They don't have the tools. They don't have the help, the resources, or the mindset, and so they're falling until they essentially halfway through the film. At this point, the hero's attempted to find some solutions, but hasn't found quite the answer yet. And they reach the midpoint, which is essentially that dark night of the soul. It's that moment of despair where the hero is like out of options, and it feels hopeless and helpless. And at that point, that is the depth of the conflict, right? That is really where the conflict, both internally, what the hero is dealing with internally, the emotions, their thoughts, their beliefs, are at their low. As well as externally, oftentimes that's where the house is about to be lost, right? With what my parents were going, what my family were going through. But then it is in those moments where the transformation occurs, where the metamorphosis occurs, where the hero must relinquish and let go of the old self, of the ego, of the wanting to do things their way, and they must open themselves up to a new way, to the greater good. And oftentimes that's like the on the knees moment of like, someone help, I need help, like, are you there, hello, greater source, creator, like, where are you? And then oftentimes that is where the rising action begins, where the hero must then begin putting one foot in front of the other to actually, if they are going to overcome this, that they are going to then begin to ascend. And one of the first things that happens once they open themselves is the guide or the mentor appears, right? Like once the student is ready, the master appears, or the teacher appears. So, and oftentimes this has to do with the fact that before this, they wanted things done their way. They wanted it all done their way, and they weren't open to receiving that guideship. At least not in the way that that guide was wanting to come in. And that's why in Star Wars, Yoda doesn't want to teach Luke and is saying he's not patient, he's not ready. I don't want to teach this kid. And then once the hero reaches that point of teachability, then that's where he actually goes on to the rising action with the guide's help to then move toward essentially the climax of the film. Is oftentimes the test, where it's like, okay, now that the hero has not only learned the tools, but also what they must believe about themselves, what they must embody, not just talk the talk, but walking the walk. There's oftentimes a final testing time, where it's like, okay, are you actually going to take the action now? And this applies to our everyday life, and this applies to the bigger moments in our lives where testing times show up in the big ways, and that ultimately is going to test who we are, what we embody. Do we embody belief? Do we embody possibility? And if not, that's okay. You you're gonna have another opportunity, you know, too.
It's almost like we're all living our own hero's journey. We're all the main character in our own movies. And
Well,
I,
those of us that choose to be, and there is those that don't choose that path. There is the path of the victim, but it is an illusion. You know, that is a path of illusion, because ultimately each one of us is a creator.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And it really just comes down to like simply making that choice. I like to frame it as okay, I'm the main character of the movie. This is all happening for me. And when you choose to live your life that way, life actually sometimes feels like a movie. Now,
Hmm.
movie
Hmm.
isn't always sunshine and rainbows. There's, as Evan showed in the hero's journey, there's times that are a bit darker than others. But I love this framework because everyone listening can practice it in their journals. Practice telling your story through the hero's journey framework. And I'm even going to link Evan's website down below because I've watched a handful of his brand story videos and they all follow this framework. And so Evan and I was actually got to see Evan create one of these films. We both did a house build in Mexico, and so we were helping to build homes for families in need. And so that was really cool to actually be in the story and watch how Evan put it all together so beautifully. So, Evan, what are some other businesses or missions that you helped to amplify? Because that's the main reason why I wanted you on this show. I see you as a creator for change, as someone using stories as a vehicle and this framework as a vehicle to help others get their message out there and make change. So, what are some other missions you've helped?
Yeah. So picking up right off of the bat of, what initially began that trajectory of like working with some pretty awesome big brands, before I burned out. Greatness Collective was a big one. We did a video for them. Me, actually, it was just me. I just went and shot in 2 days in Mexico, and then that film really, like the founder, Mike Sherbakov, was just like just over the moon when he saw that film, and he knew right away. I remember he spoke it out. He said, "This is going to 10x our community. We're going to be booked out." And that is what happened. I mean, the community really started to grow, and that's when Doug got involved and a lot of other individuals in the Greatness Collective. We witnessed the community just start to really just expand, and then that ultimately led to now to working with Doug, and we're about to release that, and we're still working on the behind the scenes on that one. But between then and those two, those were really, like really big checkpoints. Once I got out of the inpatient facility, I that's when I was like pretty much at like a ground floor, and then the first thing that completely like re-sparked my passion for life, I'd say, was actually just making the decision to go back to the things I enjoyed when I was a kid, which was video games. So I started to play video games, and there was that COVID stimulus. So I was just in the house during COVID playing video games, and that turned into me then entering like Discord servers, communities with people who liked gaming. Because I was like, that was always a part of myself that I always hid, because I always was like treated like a nerd in school for like being a big video game junkie. But I just fully dove into that world and was like, I'm gonna make friends in this world. I'm gonna go and I'm just gonna play video games, and I'm just gonna try to have fun again, because I was just for the last few months I was just in such a dark place. And I ended up in rooms with like in the crypto space, crypto gaming, because then I also started getting into crypto, which I was always interested in, like just anything online where it was like I could gamify. It was gamifying finance. Okay, cool. Learning how to do NFTs, which was art, all the things that I enjoyed in the digital world. And I always loved tech. So it was just all things were combining. And then I ended up actually being in rooms with like founders of startups, of crypto startups. And it was really just like by following my passion, I ended up in rooms with startups that had been raising capital, were raising millions, and when they'd be like, "Hey, who are you?" I'd be like, "Well, I do brand story stuff," and I was part of me that was like, still in that upper limiting, like I didn't even know if I wanted to get back into it, but people, it was like, even though I was very like hesitant, people like founders, they just like they saw my value, they saw what I could do for them, and they brought me in. They started to bring me in first as an advisor, I helped a team in the Philippines of very young founders. They were 20, 21 years old, 20 years old, and they were launching their first NFT project, and brought me on. We did 1.2 million in sales with that. They brought me on, and in 2 weeks, I helped them triple their following, really grow their community. I think up to 5x growth in their Discord server, and like just really crushed it for them. And then it just started. Like the next team saw the success. They brought me in, helped Chill Chat, the next gaming company startup, raise almost 8.5 million. And they brought me on as head of brand and marketing. So that was a lot of fun because I got to advise and consult for a much larger team, 20 people, and it was all remote. And it was really just high level stuff. What I loved about it is like when you start to help like higher level organizations, companies, and clients, like it's crazy because it's like the tiniest pivot can like lead to massive results. Like it was a few I came in there and I was just like, okay, this is all great what you guys are like. Here's a tweak, here's a tweak, here's a tweak, and it was literally just like from like under 1,000 followers to over 30,000, getting collabs with Steve Aoki and Dylan Francis, and really all that changed was that I sat down with the founder and I asked him about what was his passions in video games, and we went into his origin story and brought out a lot of that authenticity into their pitch, into the content that we would make, because now it was coming from a real place of not just attempting to like guess about the market, but it's like the founder understood like, oh, I am the market. And when he came from that authentic place, everything shifted. So those were some big ones in the crypto space. And then I started to pivot towards health and wellness when I started to, again, do more of the journaling and realize that the greater purpose beyond just playing video games and having fun was actually to turn back to the system that had initially sort of just been broken and then led to brokenness in my life and in my family's life, and start to do the work toward fixing it. Like that was like the real life video game. Like that was like the real life. That was like the real boss battle to like go after, and so that's what I began doing next. And that's where we met, was when my first health and wellness client really was the Abundance Retreat, which was the Red Pill experience at the time when they brought me on.
Yeah, they teach a lot about health and wellness and just sustainable living. And yeah, that's where we met. And then I know you also do work for the stem cell clinic.
Yeah, so right now we're working with human wellness centers, and we've been, we began in December, and now it's 3 for 3, where they're really starting to see expansion. We just saw their following expand from like I think 5K when we began with them to now over 20,000, 23,000, and getting some really, really, really like dialed in avatars, just manifesting just like the highest end, like working with celebrity influencers, and that's bringing a lot of exposure to their page. And then of course having their brand story clarified so they could, that's actually what began attracting those types of influencers, was the founder Brian Kong, like showing up to share his story in a way that was clear, authentic, and created that through line for the audience to like understand how stem cells and combined with holistic modalities would be able to help them. So we're seeing a lot of traction there, helping a sleep apnea clinic, and they're actually helping my dad right now, which is pretty awesome. Dr. Henry, he was there at the event, and we've helped them as well expand. Yeah, and we're 3 for 3. We're 3 for 3 right now, and that's really how I want to grow. I'd say is I want to like, and we have that is like prioritizing integrity.
Yeah, yeah, and that's, I also want to put that out there that, when it comes to measuring things like views and revenue, it's not just for vanity's sake, because that's a reflection of, okay, how many people are we, like how many minds are we opening up to these holistic methods? How many of them are investing in our services that actually do good for them? Because as you saw in Evan's story, he was sold a product that did not do well for him. And so profit and revenue is a direct reflection of, okay, how much value are we getting? That's what the money exchange is. It's an exchange of value, and in this case, it's very ethical. So Evan, that's super, super impressive. And I just want to give some final takeaway messages to the audience, because I hope by this point you see the value in sharing your story. Not only does it lead to healing, but it also leads to opportunities, it leads to deeper connection, and if you want to take it a step further, it could even lead to you building a brand that really helps other people. Earlier we mentioned how sometimes it could be scary to put your story out there because you're not sure if people are going to see it, if you're going to get engagement. I know what that feels like firsthand. So does Evan. And so if you make a post sharing your story, feel free to tag us. Feel free to DM us on Instagram saying, hey, I saw you on the Creators for Change podcast. You inspired me to share my story. Here's the post. We'll like it. We'll leave a comment. We'll support you. So I hope that helps you take that next step in sharing your story. Evan, where can people connect with you and work with you if they choose to?
Yeah, so you could go ahead and link my new school. It's super, like literally I just, I haven't even launched it yet. So this is like the first time I'm even publicly talking about it. Right now we literally have 7 people in there. Like I launched a circle and then we pivoted to school and we're going with school. And it's called Brand Story Builders. I also pivoted like 3 times from our names, but we're sticking with Brand Story. It's just I'm just kind of like known as the Brand Story guy now, even though I thought about like pivoting away from that. People see that's how they know me, and that is ultimately over these last 7 years. That's the specialty that is helping people build both their personal brand stories and their business brand stories and weaving the two together. And so that's what we'll be doing there. And so I'd say follow me on Instagram is where I mostly post. So you can link that as well. It's just my name. You can find me on there.
Awesome. I'll put a link down below. Well, Evan, thank you again for being on the podcast. We'll have to do it again in the future. And thanks again.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ari.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.